It's time for Show X.
Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to Show X Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to Show X Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado.
Hey, wait a second. I'm on the show too, and I don't get any billing at all? Well, I know how to solve this. Soldater, Fremad, March! You're listening to Show X with our favorite Scotsman Ken, our child of the corn Wayne, currently living in Colorado, and Todd, who now has an army of angry Norwegians at his back. Enjoy the show! You know what the best part about an army? Do you want to know what the best part about an army of angry Norwegians is?
What is that best part?
They work for smoked salmon.
I would also work for smoked salmon, and I'm not even Norwegian. Smoked salmon is the bomb, especially when it's been barbecued with like lemon pepper. That's beautiful.
Nice. And I see, I'm trying on my little desktop calendar to get us closer and closer to the current date, essentially. And there's some really good facts in here, but the one that caught me, that I'm only a few days behind on this right now, Monday of this week, but because I remember this date or at least close to it very specifically. March 22nd of 1993, the first ever Intel Pentium processor is released.
Ooh.
It came in at 60 megahertz and 66 megahertz versions. And for all the discussion about manufacturing process and stuff, to put it in perspective, was manufactured on an 800 nanometer process.
Wow.
Oh my god.
Because we're talking today, right, about the latest processors being on some form of what they're calling a 7 nanometer at the lowest level, up to potentially 5s coming out, and Intel currently being on a 14, moving towards a 10. So that fact out there for everyone.
By the way, immediately following this show, I'm headed down to Egypt to help out with the Suez Canal with my axe.
That's not a good solution, actually. I don't know why they haven't thought of that. Just cut the thing in half, right?
Oh, well.
I chuckled. I think the best meme I saw about the ship that's stuck there is the one of the single digger on the edge trying to dig out the front of it.
I know.
When it talked about something, I think the meme I saw was effectively, when most of the world's industry, whatever, is on what many people considered low or unskilled labor.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, put yourself in perspective, guys. We're all in this together. So, hey, just thoughts. Yep. Anyhow.
Grab a shovel, people.
Right? Join in. Help. But
I hate, this is going to sound so bad, but it's just sand.
Oh. I do wish...
I'm not suggesting that with shovels you can dig out a cargo ship. I'm just saying, you can do better than one front loader to try and dig this thing out.
To restart the transportation industry for commodities around the world.
I'll tell you what, they'll get us all on a flight to Cairo tonight, and we'll get out and push.
But for everyone today, actually, I got to double check. Let's see. I'm going to write it.
No, I'm salty. I'm glad you brought that. I'm glad I brought that up because I'm salty about it because some stuff that's supposed to be delivered for the new computer builds was delayed by another 2 weeks.
You're actually affected.
Yep.
Well, I've also seen the memes tied into the whole CPU and GPU shortages and everything out there as well, where it's like, NVIDIA has us covered. All the new 3000 series are on their way. Picture of the ship.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot going on in the world. But today we're going to focus a little bit about toxicity and essentially what
toxicity in the city.
See, I was gonna try to do the Britney version, but I knew I could do I could not do that well.
I don't even. I don't even know. I don't even know the words to that thing.
No, me either. I know the beat, and I was like, nope, I can't do anything.
I know
to this.
I know the beat, and I know what Britney looked like in the video because, of course, I would.
I think I was like 12, 13 at the time, so I absolutely remember that too. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
But
by the way, I have a new sports girlfriend, and I'm so excited.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an athlete of the fair sex whose career I am obsessed by.
I can understand that.
Like 20 years ago it was, or 15 years ago, it was Diana Taurasi, who played college basketball at UConn and then became an WNBA player, and I may have won a couple of MVPs and a couple of titles or whatever, and she was my sports girlfriend for a long time, but someone has usurped it.
Oh.
I've been watching World Cup biathlon, or biathlon World Cup.
I would not have pictured or thought of that sport first.
Yeah, no, they're so the Norwegians, of course, are really good at World Cup. Or they're really good at World Cup. They're really good at biathlon, and the women's team has a skier that won 9 of 11 events over the last 6 weeks.
Oh wow!
Yep,
that's incredible.
And they did there was a YouTube video where somebody had pieced together a bunch of clips from her press conferences, and I am not ashamed to say this, but I am smitten.
Now, is this more her personality?
Yes. Well, then, and the fact that she's a badass skier and could shoot a gun better than me.
Gotcha. So basically what this means is he is finding what is the alpha or the perfect type of person to align with where he lives today in the great Norwegian North, where being able to ski and hunt at the same time is a valuable skill.
Yes. It's also very useful for James Bond. Whether you want to be, that's the two career paths available. Really, you can either be James Bond or you can be Norwegian. Those are the two career paths.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Nice.
So I would just like to say, when the zombie apocalypse happen, I am going to find Norwegian biathlon skier Tiril Eckhoff, and we're gonna get out of it alive because she can shoot, and I will do anything to survive.
There you go. The tenacity and skill combined.
Yep, exactly.
Very nice. No, that's good. That's good. So,
honestly, I wanted to do 10 minutes of silly stuff because this is going to be a shouty episode, I'm afraid.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I had something there for a cuss, but I have since lost it. Oh, well.
Don't.
Yeah, no, shoot, I forget. Oh, I was going to say happy congrats and such to, hopefully, as Lantis is listening to us now, Lantis is sharing in the show with, I don't know what to call, Mr. Lantis. Such as well.
Lantis is already a dude, though. So it's Mr. and Mr.
No, that's fine. But just Lantis's partner in crime, or Lantis's, should be with, I'm hoping. And so congrats on that, and hopefully things are going well, since last we heard that was almost to the timeline being up and should be all good now. So hopefully that's working out for you, Lantis.
Super excited.
All right. But today's show in general is going to be talking about toxicity. We're hoping to look at somewhat in the industry in general, not just gaming, but movies, media, and stuff like that. All the kind of things of how, as I tagged the show a little bit, can you love something too much? And should those companies and groups and things that create the things we tend to love care about what things we love and how we love them? As kind of a generalization of getting into what we'll be conversing about today. Hey, look, 10 minutes in. Perfect timing. So, as we get things
all along.
as we get things kicked off today, to kind of bring up a topic with it, I'll lean over to you, Todd, to start us on a discussion here.
Okay. So there are a couple of things that got me set off on this topic. One of them was a YouTube video by Upper Echelon Games, where he's essentially describing a copyright strike that was sent to him, the notification of the resolution of a copyright strike that was made against him. This was YouTube's automated thing.
Okay.
Sending him a response on resolution of a copyright strike that was sent by the legal representation of Destiny 2 Twitch streamer Sarah Daniels.
Okay.
I started digging in, and I got curious, because we haven't really heard a lot about fake DMCA takedowns for a while.
No, I have not.
DMCA system from YouTube, as I understand it, is largely automated, and they respond to pretty much anything that could plausibly be a valid DMCA takedown, with where they take down the video, the person who posted the video has to appeal. There's a process where you and the copyright holder can adjudicate amongst yourselves, or you provide evidence to YouTube saying, this is transformative, or whatever, and then somebody at YouTube arbitrates, and either the strike stays, or what happens most of the time is that the DMCA claim is resolved and the video goes back up.
Yes.
Okay.
So it happens.
Before we jump in any further, I have a feeling that one of the main things we're going to want to talk about here is this automated system. So before we get our
No.
The automated system's not the issue. I think the understanding of it's important, just from the perspective of this is where it happens and where it comes up. But I actually don't think that's a major part of it.
That people have with the DMCA strikes is the fact that it is automated, right? And that causes a lot of the issues because we don't know whether it's actually got a human hand in it or not.
But at the same time, I just wanted to
briefly mention that my opinion of the automated thing is it kind of makes sense, right? If you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of potential strikes per day, you can't feasibly have that many employees checking it and still be profitable, right?
Right. So there's a lot to unpack. There's no way that Google or Alphabet could employ enough people to handle all of the potential copyright strikes or copyright claims that come in on a 24-hour period, to adjudicate them manually. So you need an automated system. It's also there's government regulation that puts it on YouTube to err on the side of the copyright claimant. Right, so the system is by design, more heavy-handed than it probably should be.
Agreed.
It definitely defers to that. Yeah,
but that is not the story. The story is that the upper echelon received an email from YouTube telling him that the copyright claim was resolved. He didn't have to do anything, and that YouTube's internal systems took a look at the copyright claim, realized it was fake or fraudulent or frivolous, I guess is the right word, frivolous, that the DMCA claim was frivolous, and reacted somewhat automatically. Now, when I started digging into this, I ran into a web of it's a relationship web. There was a point in time where I felt like the weird guy in the drama movie or the suspense movie that's got newspaper articles and pictures up on all of his walls and like yarn running.
I was gonna say, does the actual connections? Yeah.
So the lawyer who submitted the DMCA claim on behalf of Sarah Daniels works for a law firm called Bitwise Legal. Bitwise Legal advertises Bungie, the developer of Destiny 2 as one of its clients, or one of its past clients. Sarah Daniels is married to a Bungie developer.
This is getting suspicious. Go on.
Uh-huh. The video that was copyright claimed was a video criticizing Sarah Daniels for allegedly conspiring with some other female YouTubers to drama bomb or to negative public relations bomb a competing Destiny 2 streamer to sort of knock to I have to remember. I have to get the wording on this most correct, because I talked to the Mistress of Giggles about this at fair length last night. In an effort to prevent him from gaining more prevalence in the community.
Okay. So
Those
to keep a man down.
Those are not my words. See, that's where I went with it. Like it really looks like a bunch of people in a clique of Destiny 2 streamers, and absolutely there is one. And for those that don't know, the Destiny 2 community is a sewer. The Destiny 2 Twitch community is worse. Ooh. And the clique inside the Destiny 2 Twitch community is even worse.
Gotcha.
Right? And it's not like other Twitch communities that you may be a part of. Like the Europa Universalis 4 Twitch community, is like they kind of all know each other, but it's a really small game. Yeah. And so they do end up going together to cons, and they do end up hosting each other, and they do that kind of thing. But no, this is a very distinct in-group that only boosts each other and doesn't have a whole lot of time for people outside of the in-group.
Okay.
And the person that they tried to bomb with negative publicity was not in this group. Now, in all fairness, the allegations that they were posting, I believe to be absolutely true, and they were all of a dude made me uncomfortable in an interaction in some way.
Gotcha.
3 or 4 or 5 years ago. So anyway, I don't want to relitigate that.
DMCA is the tool they used to
silence the criticism.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm starting to understand. So the DMCA was not truthful. However, there was past interactions between the claimant and the person who committed the copyright issues, where that person was an issue.
Yeah,
was problematic.
I'm not explaining this well. In June, multiple claims of misconduct happened within minutes of each other. Prominent Destiny 2 streamers were dealt in to lend weight to the accusations. It ended up building up to a critical mass. The streamer in question got banned on Twitch conveniently right before an event in which Bungie was giving away shaders to people who gifted subs on Twitch, but that's probably just a coincidence. And 7 months later or 8 months later, the streamer who got banned on Twitch, his Destiny 2 account has been dev banned with no appeal. And the video that got DMCA copyright struck was the video laying all this information out and going, what the hell's going on?
Gotcha. So basically he got nailed for saying, hey guys, it looks like I'm being targeted by these DMCA claims that don't seem to be valid claims, but it's tool that exists for people to file like things against. Well, and I'm bringing it up in general because this is a tool. We'll speak more about the specifics here, but it's a tool I've definitely seen gone beyond this, right? In the most toxic form in gaming, right? We've seen it with things like when people would swat others, like swatting, right? That is like one of the most evil, toxic versions of it. But I've also seen it on social media and stuff where people will file any kind of whatever the automated tool is. DMCA is what we're talking about now, but they'll basically report people, right, for no discretion or no anything they actually did. But because the mechanism's there, and by default, these companies tend to take down a person's posts or affect them prior to investigating it, and you have to reactively put in to say, no, that's not true, and here's why, and then it has to be reviewed before you come out. There is an impact that even a fraudulent claim of any kind on any of these systems can affect your money if you're making money off these things, or just your access. I hear it on social media all the time of people being put in Facebook jail for posts and stuff like that. It can be used as a weapon, essentially. And so that's part of the concern of the tool. But specific to this case, again, Todd, go ahead.
So here's the thing. So this whole banning and the DMCA takedown stuff is only a couple of weeks old, but the whole banning thing has been going on for 8 months. Not a single article about this anywhere. Right? Nobody's talking about it outside of a couple of YouTube channels that are like, hey, by the way, this is what happened. This is what happened to this Destiny streamer, and now the videos being critical of the people who took him down are getting DMCA'd. And oh, by the way, it's being done by lawyers who also have Bungie as a client.
That's a concern, right? Because of the tie. Yeah, it goes back into like, is someone's relationship also being weaponized into this?
Yeah. So anyway, it's this is sort of, we're starting with a counterpoint. Now I want to pivot to, the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Well, no. So this is important, right? It is now the Snyder Cut for Justice League is now a result of toxic fandom.
Okay, I'm super confused. Go on.
So am I. And I really can't. I really can't explain it to you. But yeah, it's it's one of those things that made it into the commentariat. Right? Oh, here we go.
I've heard nothing but good things with the Snyder Cut so far, by the way. I haven't seen it or anything, but all I've heard is that it's a much better improvement.
So am I. Here, I'm gonna drop this into the chat. This is a blog called I Am Geek. That says the Snyder Cut is a reward for toxic fandom. Now you can say that this is just a blog and who cares, but at the same time, right? I guess my question is, aren't fake DMCA takedowns or frivolous DMCA takedowns worse than wanting a director's actual vision of a movie before the studio heads destroyed it?
Well, I think what you got to talk about is the effect of tools and what's trying to be accomplished, right? Because there's a challenge there, and I think these two have a slight separate approach. Because what we're talking about with the DMCA, I'm hearing essentially that it's a focus on way people can take specific action to shut somebody down, right? They're trying to shut somebody down because whatever reason they do or don't like them. Whereas
I'm gonna read some of this. I'm gonna read some of this article that I just posted in the chat. Let's think about how the Snyder Cut came into existence outside of fan petitions. When you think about Snyder Cut, it's hard not to associate it with guerrilla-style social media attacks on all things related to Warner Brothers or those who spoke down upon Justice League or any other DC Snyder film. A massive bullying campaign that ultimately resulted in these fans getting what they wanted, along with the label of being a toxic fandom. Snyder, in a piece written by Cinema Blend, had this to say: "I think that's sour grapes. There's really no other way to say it. We know people who were architects of that narrative, and it's pretty obvious what their agenda is. Those people that I've been held back from confronting by wiser people in the room, because I'd love to get at some of these characters. Some direct conversation would be nice. Just say, 1, you don't know crap about what you're talking about, and we can break down everything they've ever said. I can make a list. There's a few of these guys where I could just get a list of everything they've ever said and that they thought was right, and I could tell them every single thing they've said is wrong. So, okay, fine, but I don't know. Toxic feels like the most overused word in popular culture.
When we were talking ahead of time about, how labels, right, as Ken was bringing up and stuff, and the lexicon, that is often a major piece, is that the term toxic gets overloaded, right? I use that. I say overloaded a lot because so many terms you say it, and like Ken was saying in the pre-show or at the beginning of the show, that can mean a dozen different things depending on who's looking at it. In the situation here where you're trying to talk about when someone's trying to equate that a toxic community, meaning, from my opinion, at least this is Wayne's personal opinion about the original cut of Justice League, I watched it, I went meh, and was content to never watch another DC Universe movie in that line because I lost all interest. I thought it was a jumbled mess. Both Batman vs. Superman and Justice League I thought were kind of hacked together where it seemed like there were good ideas in there, and yet they never had the time to develop. Like seemed like there was so much more story behind the scenes that was left on the cutting room floor. I felt that way before seeing the Snyder Cut, right? Where I was just like, yep, those were DC movies, and much like, for me, Batman and Robin, an amazing cast that got shite on in the worst possible way, right? Like, this should have been an amazing movie. Based on just you cast it.
Arnold's Mr. Freeze is about as good as you could have possibly gotten.
Well, that Uma Thurman is Ivy, and like I actually like George Clooney as a Batman with if he didn't have a nipple suit with overshine, and we're allowing him to actually play the playboy like Bruce Wayne. It was well cast. Crap movie. So I kind of felt the same way about Justice League and Batman vs Superman. I was like, I was down for the castings, but the movie they gave me didn't live up. And so I was toxic, I guess, in the sense that I gave what I thought was an accurate criticism of the movie I was given. And that's part of my challenge is what it sounds like what I'm hearing is that they, studio-wise, whomever, Joss Whedon, whoever you want to go to that complained, I don't know everyone who did, didn't like that they had some legit criticism come on them saying, yeah, that might have been your vision. It's garbage. And you made a garbage movie. You wasted what could have been brilliant. And then I turn around and I watched the Snyder Cut just the other day and was like, holy crap. In fact, my criticism to that piece specifically on Justice League was I had to go look up to see what had changed between the Whedon version and the Snyder version, and found out that I was like, there were so many more scenes here that I was kind of like, how much did they have to reshoot? And from what research I saw, they only reshot like 5 minutes of video for the Snyder Cut. And then Snyder went in there and took out all of the garbage that Whedon had added and just put back forth his original vision. And I was kind of like, so there were at least 2 hours of quality, what I felt were actual story-driven footage already filmed that the original cut just didn't use. No wonder it was a hot mess, right? And so for me, what I'm taking as what I feel like I'm being justified even further, legitimized in my original criticism of the theatrical release, the original release.
Yep.
And so
no, you're a part of the toxic fandom, Wayne. Yep. You're a part of the toxic fandom.
But let's discuss what you mentioned. The word toxic's overused. What exactly is the reasoning for saying it's toxic? Because let me give an example. So say you join a pottery club and you love pottery. And for years, you've enjoyed pottery, and you would consider yourself a potter, right? You enjoy on the weekends doing your pottery stuff. Okay, you join this club, and say there's 99 other members, and you find that it doesn't really matter how many, somewhere between 40 and 80 of them are really top-notch people, or quiet, and you don't know anything about them. And then let's say somewhere between 1 and 20 people, so 1 to 20% of them are super toxic. So they're just hateful. They're racist, they're sexist, they're horrible, horrible, horrible people, right? Who nobody actually wants to be associated with, including those in the club. But those in the club say, hey, I'm not really here to talk to them. I'm not here to hang out with them. I don't represent them whatsoever. I'm here to enjoy pottery because I love doing pottery. Does that make you toxic because you're part of that club?
So,
and I think that's a really difficult question to answer because it's a gray area question.
I would say,
answer.
Well, that changes, Ken, because I think the way you're describing is a piece, because that's a toxicity from the opinion of those outside looking at the club as a whole. So I would say one thing: if the club consists of a portion of people that are objectively horrible, if that club becomes known as being a horrible place to be because everyone in it's horrible, or any interaction of a new person coming in is horrible, or when that pottery club goes to try to share their works at an art thing or something, and they actively like go out and attack or hurt or talk bad about anyone else at the thing that's not part of the club, then yes, if you're still part of that club, you're embracing toxicity in the environment. Now, if we're talking more specifically about internal to the club, and you have groups of people who their toxicity is that, I'm sorry, if you don't throw your stoneware, if you're not actually throwing your pot and you're trying to do pinch pots, you're just beneath us. That's a different conversation, right, about the toxicity. And so just being associated with the group may not be, might be certain individuals that are. I think when we're talking about this, about the culture and what we're talking about, like extending it back out to the fandom, I do think it's been overloaded, because toxicity as a whole just means people that generally have negative interactions with others, aren't providing a positive anything, right? Positive interactions, thoughts, are not encouraging. They're always negative. They're always criticizing, and perhaps trying to undermine others for whatever reason. And I mean, it's like, I would see it more like from the fandom perspective of, and I'll extend this to all, it's toxic when people are gatekeeping, when people are, only allowing one viewpoint to exist and thus fighting others and things like that, that is actions that themselves are toxic and might therefore define a person as being so. That simply having criticisms, and I think in the Justice League perspective, you had a lot of people who had criticisms and may be very vocal, because if nothing else, us geeks tend to have opinions and like to share them and go in depth about why so-and-so was completely off because they didn't read this nuance of a book over here that talked about that exact thing. We can do that.
See,
we do
Wayne,
that.
I disagree. I don't like the gatekeeping. I don't like the gatekeeping verbiage either.
Well, I say that as an action that can be toxic. Not that all toxic people are gatekeepers, but it's just like of the type of things that I would describe as a toxic behavior.
I don't like the term gatekeeping at all.
Okay.
Like, if you're going to come in and run your mouth about about, as an example, something we're going to talk about in just a little bit, how Star Wars Episode 8 is the greatest film of the Skywalker saga, and I say, well, hold on a second, there are no Sith Lords in this story. That's a problem. That's a problem for all of these reasons, not the least of which is the rules of the universe say that there are always two.
At least two, yeah.
Right? I mean, Master Yoda himself says it. There are always two. And yes, usually, or not usually, sometimes more, but as a rule, only two. And the response to that is, to move the discussion. Or, when Collider did their review of Star Wars, of Episode 8, and talked about it for 3.5 hours and never said the word interdictor cruiser once. Because, one of the main storylines of Star Wars Episode 8, if you haven't watched it yet, is a ripoff of Battlestar Galactica episode. And totally invalidated by the fact that interdictor cruisers are a thing. Right? And that's knowledge that I have, right? Because I know things. And somebody's going, this was awesome, and it was so compelling. It's like, no, it wasn't compelling at all. Because there are things in this universe that were just, a sorry person who knows things, you're going to get punished because you know things, and we're going to do something stupid that relies on the fact that people don't know that interdictor cruisers are a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so my question about this, though, in this conversation is, do you feel as though when someone doesn't accept your like criticism view of them, like why they thought 8 was good, and you're all these reasons you disagree. Do you feel that when the term we started with this and kind of led into it with gatekeeping comes in, do you feel like people have labeled you or something like as gatekeeping, in that you're saying, here are all these reasons people can't or should not like 8 or something like that? Or are you feeling like you are being somehow held back from being allowed to maintain a level of fandom and enjoyment because people are saying, but you should have liked 8 and here's why?
I'm passively being accused of being a gatekeeper. Right? I myself have never been directly like you, Todd, are gatekeeping the Star Wars fandom. I'm not that active online to the point where I would debate somebody about this in an online forum. I have talked about it with people like the Mistress of Giggles who liked 8, who doesn't understand why I have the problems that I have with it. But no, I have never been directly accused of being a gatekeeper, but the insinuation is that I am.
So the reason I bring that up, go ahead.
Because I have these expectations.
Okay.
And I'm applying my expectations to the thing, and it's failing to meet them. And I have a set of very, what I consider to be logical, grounded in the universe. Right, and I'm going to say rules, but it's not necessarily that strong.
Like you're talking about things that have been defined, and therefore you're just continuing based on that understand that definition. Fully understand that. Right. Now I'm more focused on the idea of the gatekeeping piece because I can understand, like you said, what I'm hearing is that kind of like what you said is a passive accusation where no one's calling you it, but the actions therefore of. Because for me, and this is Wayne defining his terminology, his lexicon, gatekeeping is an action that is actually trying to keep others from being allowed to be involved in the conversation or be a participant in whatever it is that you're doing. And the challenge is it can be, because you can, and it's said how T-Nubis said in the thing where he's saying gatekeeping is an argument or used as is often a way to shut down discussion or criticism. Gatekeeping is like even labeling someone as or doing something that is trying to keep someone out completely. It's one thing to have disagreements. And because I tend to agree with, Todd, your analysis of the Star Wars series when it comes to Episode 8. I personally think 8 is plot-wise, story-wise, hot, steaming pile of garbage and such, while cinematically I can see things people enjoyed about the visual display of a lot of things. I always say it's a group of a whole lot of really pretty scenes that were just kind of thrown into a basket together and then laid out in whatever order they came out of.
Right.
But if I were to take that and say, therefore, anyone who says they liked Episode 8 is not truly a Star Wars fan and therefore should not be allowed to have a conversation about Star Wars, then I believe I would be doing gatekeeping type of actions. If I were to instead just say, I think you're wrong, I think you're mistaking all these things, or I think you're being way too like free with what you're willing to accept, but that's fine, you can still be a Star Wars fan, I feel like that's just disagreeing, right? And so I do understand, because gatekeeping gets used, like if you ever, it's a label, right? And it's a label that has a negative connotation with it, like toxic, where if I can identify you or anyone as you are a gatekeeper, so many other people, once that label gets thrown out there, will suddenly just say, oh, you are now a horrible person and I will not accept you in any way. So it's like the DMCA thing in its own way. It's its own type of weapon being used in the thing. And so like in the conversation of toxicity and fandom, if you can label an entire group of people that are providing criticism that may be legitimate criticism as toxic, because that is what you as a defense mechanism have used to label them, what you're essentially doing is trying to get the rest of the world who haven't been involved in the conversation to ignore or diminish everything they had to say. Because, oh, they're just toxic, so you don't actually have to pay attention to what they're saying, even if it's legit. And so that's where I think you're running into it.
That's the same thing that's happening at the start of the show, what we're talking about with the DMCA. It's not actually addressing the argument. It's finding some other methodology of saying, no, I'm going to shut you down because I can't actually argue with you in the open.
Yep.
Yeah, it's always that these are tools people are using.
Or I shouldn't have to argue with you in the open.
Yeah. Well, it's a tool used often by people that don't have a legit argument, right? They have an opinion.
Yes.
It's a strong opinion. But because whenever anyone brings actual discussion and facts against it, it falls apart. The straw man arguments, all those various things. The best thing you can do is shut that argument down, that person, that group down by labeling or doing some cheap trick, some tool to take them out of the conversation because you don't actually have any real discourse to be had. Because the conversation comes in, we were going to talk, we have several specific examples of this, but I think we can stick to the Star Wars one continuing in because you had one about Mandalorian that you brought in an article on as well, Todd, from Vulture. But it's an example, right? Again, of criticism being levied one way or another, thoughts about it, and then somebody taking this view and encapsulating in some terminology words to try to like throw out, I would say, entire viewpoints or opinions or diminish them in some way. I'm doing this without trying to get into political conversation because I feel like this happens in political stuff all the time.
It's another form of the guilt by association trick.
Okay.
Right. So, we've talked about this before, but there was research done by the Center for Data and Society, where they tried to use they looked at a couple of YouTube channels for 14 or 16 months and identified all the linkages between people, and then posted a connections web of all the people that they don't like. And so you're not supposed to like, for example, Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan talked to Dave Rubin once, and Dave Rubin talked to Stefan Molyneux once. And so Joe Rogan's connected to Stefan Molyneux, so they're all alt-right. Right?
Okay.
So
I'm sure there is some sort of correlation between who you talk to and echo chambers, right? Because that there must be some connection there. However, to say that's definitive and is also incorrect.
Well,
it's a correlation. It's not 100%.
There's a whole bunch of other things that are wrong with it. Like, they cut off when they were looking at Joe Rogan's podcast so that they would miss specific people, so that their little web thing wouldn't connect people whose views are opposite each other through Rogan.
For example, Bernie Sanders.
Or Jimmy Dore or Abby Martin or there's a handful, right? Rogan talks to everybody.
Yes.
So anyway, so this thing from Vulture called "Has the Mandalorian Succumbed to the Dark Side?" and it's talking about that scene at the end of the culmination of season 2 of The Mandalorian, where we get Luke Skywalker as a young, vibrant,
spoiler for anyone who didn't finish season 2.
Right. Yeah, sorry. Spoiler alert if you haven't watched season 2 of The Mandalorian. But why haven't you watched season 2 of The Mandalorian yet? It's quite good.
Because Disney Plus, and not everyone wants to fund the mouse.
Well, that's fair enough.
We are past the spoiler limit on this, so just warning for those.
That's fair enough. Right? So he's not old and feeble, weak, terrible Luke Skywalker. He's the badass Luke Skywalker that we all know and love, and they even aped the Vader ass kickery from Rogue One in that scene. Like it's kind of an homage back to that. But anyway, I'm going to read a little bit of this too. It's hard to capture in words the galaxy-collapsing short-sightedness of requiring that every new Star Wars tale ultimately connect, however tangentially, with the same handful of genetically linked characters. Star Wars' bizarre obsession with force-amplifying midi-chlorian-rich blood and proximity of regular, quote-unquote, characters to those with special blood makes Lucas's galaxy far, far away, a place so vast that you need hyperspace to cross it, feel as rinky-dink as a backwater American town. The kind of place where everybody is required to kiss the same local family's butt for survival's sake. Every time a Star Wars story genuflects to the Skywalker saga yet again, Lucas's mythos shrinks further in the collective imagination. Sometimes it's so small-minded that you'd think Disney's mandate was to reimagine Mayberry with starships and laser swords.
So the first part there, where I'm talking bloodlines and usage of the Force, I have always had a problem with that in fantasy, right? You see that a lot in fantasy stories, where you'll have a lineage, genetic-based trait that allows access to certain things, certain powers, certain traits, whatever. And that is a little depressing to hear and read about, because it's a little, oh, you're predestined to this greatness, you didn't earn it. And so that's a bit lackluster if you're trying to put yourself in the shoes of that person. And it also makes it lackluster if you want to identify with anybody else in the universe, because you're like, oh, that kind of sucks.
Not at all true.
I wasn't
Not at all
there,
true, Ken.
right?
Ken, no, what you're providing it's the argument that like no. So it's only for those people who
when I read these stories.
Well, it's only for people who can only look at the magic character as being the only worthwhile character. Luke Skywalker is one of the least interesting characters in the Star Wars universe. That's why the Han Solos and others like that get all the credit, right? Because they are regular, everyday people existing in a world against those who have greater potential around them and doing very well for it.
I'm not saying
and
otherwise.
So, well, but I mean, we do that in fantasy all the time. We do it in fantasy all the time, where you build the story of all these various levels of ability, and you should find somebody in the story that you can equate to or find if it's well written. You know, this is why so many of the bigger ones, fantasy stories out there have such, you know, there's a whole team of great characters. Yes, there's almost always a overzealous ones. Like, yay, anyone who's trying to say that they want to be Superman or the story's only good because Superman's there, wow, that's unfortunate. Because, yeah, okay, so you can either joyfully go for the one character that's God or pay attention to all the other in the world, because that's life, right? I don't know. I struggle with that one, Ken, just because I hear it all the time.
I'm just simply saying that the idea of being able to train and learn skills, I personally find more interesting and enthralling than, because there's no reason why you can't have the interest in magic versus the interest in archery, or being a rogue, or being I don't know, trying to think of a Star Wars equivalent, engineer or something, or driving a ship or whatever.
Well, being a great pilot, being a Force user, being all those things. I
agree or disagree with the original author from this article, from the Vulture article. I'm just saying that, generally speaking, in fantasy stories, I do prefer not to have the genetic side of it, because I feel like it takes away the potential of showing a character's personality traits and their interests, rather than just what they're born with. That whole destiny thing is
yes. If the only character in the story is the genetic freak, then it's less interesting to me. I agree with that. I hate, because I've seen this argument made about Star Wars universe before, that it's not interesting because you have a limited set of people that can be godlike or powerful. Where for me, I'm like, wow, that's the world. That's life. And if that's all people catch from the series, then they have some pretty small vision.
See,
sorry, that's an aside, and I'm getting out there.
You've touched on something though. Is it because do they not like these things because it hits too close to home relative to reality/history, right? I mean, think about history for a second. There was a Habsburg on the throne of Spain, Italy, Austria, a handful of German principalities, right? And this is 500 years ago, right? But it was all one family, and they controlled the overwhelming majority of the land in Europe.
Okay.
Or, you know, the any of the great European noble houses, right? The House of Capet, or the the royal family that Queen Elizabeth is from. Right? And if you follow that bloodline back to when Queen Victoria the First married off most of her family to other monarchs in Europe, like, that bloodline was involved in everywhere. Or the House of Ivrea, which through their illegitimate line were the kings of Spain for a long time, right? Is it a postmodernist attack on the idea that throughout real history bloodline has mattered?
Well, sure, but I think that it's more on the point of the ideology of should it have mattered. And I think most people would agree, generally speaking, that being born a king doesn't make you better than everybody else in terms of actual phenotypical traits expressed by your genes. In fact, generally speaking, the opposite is true because you're probably going to be inbred,
And
right?
yeah, I
mean,
was going to say it doubly so
yeah,
if you're
right.
a Habsburg.
But and don't get me wrong, I think there is clearly going to be some humans who are better at certain things. For example, if you look at who was this sports person you were talking about at the start of the show, Todd? Your new girlfriend?
Tyrell Eckhoff.
Right. She is no. Don't get me wrong. I bet she has worked her absolute butt off to get where she is. She must train every single day and have the willpower of a bull. Like she is an insanely impressive person. But she would not also be there without also having genes that allow that to be possible, right?
Yep.
If she had my body, for example, I bet she wouldn't have a chance,
No.
right?
No.
And that's part of it, right? So I think there is in the end there is a genetic component with most things. However, the parts that really matter in modern society, such as intelligence, genetics has nearly nothing, an infinitesimal part to do with it. Intelligence does not correlate with your no. I can tell you, working in genetics, that the intelligence does not correlate with genes. It just simply does not. Which is why the whole racial argument is just absolute BS, because any geneticist worth their salt can glance at the data and say, no, there's nothing there, right? There's just no correlation. And so I think that's why when you look at things like Star Wars or any fantasy where there's some sort of magical inheritance of abilities, it's less magical if it's all inherited. That's the way I see it.
Well, yeah. Now, my challenge with that is just that, okay, I can accept very quickly when I'm in those stories that I will never be a Jedi, and that's okay. And that's the way it's weird for me, the people who are like, but if I can't be that, then it must be a terrible thing because I should be able to be whatever I want. And it was like actually one of the worst, one of the things that what came off Justice League, the recut, right, with Snyder Edition, that I saw a meme from right after it was opening scene with Wonder Woman doing cool things. At the end of said scene, there's a moment where a young gal who witnessed what she had done was like, oh my God, can I be you? You know, when I grow up, can I be you? And she answers with you can be whatever you want to be. And the meme came back and it's like, same scene, but says, no, I'm a god. Yeah. Right? It's like, exactly. Yes. No, you can't be Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is a god. She's comedian. You can be like.
You can pretty much just fall into a vat of nuclear goo and you're probably going to be all right.
But then you're going to be Joker. It's different. So you got to choose. You're not going to be Wonder Woman. But that was the thing where it's kind of a challenge to the kind of concept is whether it is valuable to let some people to just focus on the hope of whatever because everyone should be able to be everything, or focus on some of the reality that it takes specific work to be things, or some things are unattainable. Regardless, all of that is aside from the toxicity piece, I think. I
want to play devil's advocate on this one bit, just briefly. Right? For a little kid, it's okay to tell a little kid that they can be whatever they want to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? There's a point at which, right around teenagerdom, but your mileage may vary, where, based on scholastic performance and a bunch of other factors, you're gonna have to sit the kiddo down and have the heart-to-heart that says, you're really not cut out to be an astronaut. You may have to accept the fact that you're going to be delivering groceries for 20 years.
Or are going to be a really good plumber, or going to be a long-term,
or are going to be a really good plumber,
teacher, or all these other things that maybe don't require the level of science and math that that job does. Right?
Well, I want to come back to the toxicity because there's a point I want to make. Do you remember a few weeks ago when we talked about this scene originally, and there were these cuts of reaction videos?
From which scene specifically? The Wonder Woman one?
The Luke Skywalker scene.
Luke Skywalker. So back to Star Wars, end of Mandalorian.
Right?
Gotcha.
And the people who were watching this thing and the people who were openly weeping.
Yeah.
Right? To see Luke Skywalker, who was murdered in front of us. And not the character, not physically, but the ideal of Luke Skywalker absolutely was murdered by Rian Johnson. And
to see Luke Skywalker as we all idolized him, I guess, or most of us idolize him. Yeah, I can tell you, I cried when I saw it. But those are the people who would get identified as toxic, because those are some of the same people who criticized the way Luke Skywalker was treated in the sequel trilogy. Now explain to me how people who love a character so much that seeing him be treated in the way we sort of all expected him to be treated would drive people to tears.
So
I want somebody to explain to me how those people are toxic.
So the challenge is just loving of the thing that you love, I don't think by itself is toxic. And I think the challenge, and this goes back to, again, the labeling of a group because of the collective criticism that somebody doesn't want to accept. Because, again, there were a lot of people. I was also on the board of the people that thought Luke went out in a way that I did not enjoy. I thought there was better story that likely could have been told than what was. So I felt similar where I was like, that's all we get of him? I was so waiting for this epic thing to have him back on screen, right? Even if the goal was to, let it go to the next generation, right? I thought they could have done it more eloquently. And so I was dissatisfied with it. I gave that same kind of criticism. And I think that a group who has a criticism, like I said before, is not toxic. Now, if that group is to go forth and just constantly rail and do other activities like, threaten people or ask for people to ban or to get away from.
Do you want to go there before the break, or do you want to take the break first and come back to that?
Let's take the break because we do have a wonderful recap email coming from Ionis,
exciting.
About our
so that's the other half of the show then. Okay.
Well, this will be. I will refresh my drink so that my throat can handle an Ionis email after the break.
Yeah, right.
That is going to talk about our last week's topic, catching up about the things that should have perhaps been gone their farewell before they did versus things that were canceled too early. And so he's got an email to respond to last week's show that we'll get to after the break. We'll take the break. This one, I'm going to be playing a remix song called Legacy from DJ Pretzel from OC Remix. This is Phantasy Star 3 Legacy. I had to find something with Star in the name because we were talking Star Wars. And go figure, there's no good Star Wars gaming remix music that I've found yet. If someone has some, let me know. But this song will be just about 3 minutes long, and we'll be back right after this with an Ionis email and continuing our conversation about toxicity, what it means, and how it is affecting the world that we enjoy. So with that, you're watching ShowX here on Twitch, YouTube. Where else are we at right now? Facebook Live, other places like that. You can catch all our archives on YouTube. And we'll be back right after this.
listening to ShowX on VtWProductions.com.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the show. All right, we're going to kick things in here with a little bit of email response. So, this one saying, pretentious email about all things that should not be. So, coming to us from Ionis. Ladies and gentlemen, Brotherhood of Geekdom, Masters of Interactive Audiovisual Stimulation. I am Ionis, and my today's TED Talk is about jumping the shark in dirty, gamey, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey paradigm. First, we have to identify what jumping the shark actually means. Merriam-Webster defines jumping the shark as, quote, BS that went on too long and nobody gives an F of anymore. Man, he's gonna make me real time. I am gonna have to real time edit this thing the whole way through.
Bleep yourself.
Yep, I need a button for this. First, we have to identify what jumping the shark actually means. Oh, I just said that one. Sorry. This definition, while very broad, covers the quintessential bull-essery that revolves around the thing that nobody gives an F anymore. But what does it really mean? In layman term, it is the sensation you get of experiencing content and thinking in real time, what the F is this? Followed by a rapid flashback to the time that said product was in its best and comparing it to the currently experienced bull-essery. This sensation might be followed by thoughts defined by psychologists as, quote, derealization disorder, manifesting when the patient experiences a sensation of disconnect from the experienced BS, and especially his or her peers who seem to be enjoying the content that is presented to them. In reality, a sequel is considered good when the content provides meaningful, true to the original progression, in either major storytelling arcs or technological advances of gameplay and or visual fidelity. As such, there are a lot of intellectual properties on the market that could be, quote, unsharked, there, given sufficient amount of time and proper development cycle. Even the notorious yearly franchises could be brought back from the abyss if they weren't an exercise in recurring copy-paste surrounded by heavy monetization. Some series, like the Creative Assembly's Total War, took some decisions that boxed them into a very specific playstyle that stopped their growth. Total War series in general is a case of games growing more complex with each new release, leading to the original fans and finding themselves disconnected from the newer entries in the IP. Hero units introduced in Total War Warhammer, for example, while befitting the fantasy realm populated by powerful champions, have no place in any historical setting. Boxing the series into a fantasy or mythological constraints, or removing hero units feature and return to the more traditional combat. On the other hand, we have franchises like Baldur's Gate series, created between the years of 98 and 01. Baldur's Gate Trilogy was the essential CRPG title that put BioWare on the map. The series was remastered by Beamdog in the early 2010s, putting the IP back in people's minds and on their tables, mobiles, and refrigerators. And in 2019, Baldur's Gate 3 was announced. The game is developed by a different studio using a different set of rules, relying on different combat mechanics, taking place a century after Baldur's Gate 2 and narrowing down the number of classes and companions in the party compared to its 1998 predecessor. At a certain point, one must ask a question. Why exactly is this continuation of the Baldur's Gate series if it has so little to do with the original IP? Yes, I know nostalgia, brand recognition, yada yada. Baldur's Gate's storyline concluded in the Throne of Baal in 2001. Our protagonist became the last surviving offspring of the god of death. We had our final big battle and a satisfying resolution of the story, including the end credits that showed what happened to our mortal companions after the game ended. Why exactly do we need a third game now? Don't get me wrong, Baldur's Gate 3 might end up being a great game, but that title, why? See, I could go on and on about various franchises, but as we all know, this email is about to jump the shark itself. So how about a lightning round? Starting now. Mass Effect. Should be over with Mass Effect 3. Used the license to develop something new and original. Andromeda was not it. Dragon Age. Good series plagued by rapid development and consoleization. The third game was more comfortable using a gamepad than a mouse and keyboard. Deal breaker. Assassin's Creed. Put it down for the love of God. Give the series 5 years of breathing time. Grand Theft Auto 5. Good series. Each entry is pretty unique and fresh, but after playing the Saints Row series and after being superpowered president of the United States, getting back to being a common thug is just such a step down. Mario. I don't know. Don't care. People will buy used toilet paper if it has Mario logo on it. Credit where credit is due. Nintendo knows how to develop their platformer, though. Pokemon, 151 was enough. Thank you. Star Wars sequel trilogy. Uncomfortably disjointed and poorly handled by the studio. Just copy Marvel, you fool. DC, ditto. Civilization. Try doing your effing diplomatic AI instead of S-stating the game with more and more mechanics. You keep putting gizmos on the screen to hide the barely competent AI. Just stop. XCOM series. Holy hell! This is how you remake games from the 90s. Admit that, yeah. Mortal Kombat. I want to love you, but I can't. In today's ultra-violence, the fatality doesn't feel anything like it did back in the 90s. You got the looks, baby, but you lost the charm. You can see more gory stuff on Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones also has boobs. Tomb Raider. Holy hell! This is how you remake what used to be a triangle boob simulator in a real franchise. But stop! We got it! Also, do better films. I want to love them, but I can't. Ghostbusters. Nope. Borderlands. First was awesome and simple. Second was great and deeper. Pre-sequel was Australian. Third was epic exclusive. Enough said. Also, I hate the cock-essing claptraps. Those MFers should jump into a bathtub filled with acid for all I care. I hurt my brain every time I had to fix one of those D-wads to get an inventory upgrade. Warcraft 4. When? Final Fantasy. Mixed bag. Don't like the modern action-oriented garbage. Love some of the older ones. Star Trek. I never thought I would say it, but boy do I miss Enterprise. I really, really do. I would even take Voyager at this point. Ooh. Elder Scrolls.
What?
Unpopular opinion, but don't care one way or the other. Sims. Unpopular opinion. Keep making them. It's a gateway drug. Today she gets into Sims, tomorrow she gets into WoW. In a week, she owns your ass in PUBG and teabags your corpse. Last of Us. Make a third one. I dare you. I double dare you, MFer. Do a third one. I really want to see how gaming equivalent of The Last Jedi ends. Battlestar Galactica. I don't know how, but I want more. BSG was one of the only dark, gritty military sci-fi I need in my life. Heard that Star Trek Discovery? F off. Thank you, Fonzie, and good night.
Wow.
That's
how many
coming
times?
to us
How
from
many times
Ionis.
have we killed Diablo Ionis?
As
Is
always,
this including the video game or the mobile video game or what?
yeah, when you get it on mobile.
By the way, this is a throwback, but could you, I don't know, make it darker? That's...
Oh, so good, so good. And we have an email coming into us ready and on today's show. This one saying toxicity in the casual. Well, it helps. I know I took Bab's advice from last week's show and put the email, I don't know, on our front page.
Amazing.
Right? It seems to work. Hey, guys, first-time watcher. Followed from Wayne's post in Nerd Life. Love what I have seen so far. So you guys have discussed toxic gamer communities. But what about the community that is casual, non-ranked games that have toxic players? Like Among Us, The Forest. What sets us off these players to become angry while playing a game that is simply for fun, where nothing's at stake? And do you have experiences of this sort of thing?
Anyway, by the way. Let's just make that clear. Right, people think that ranked means it's like somehow different than casual. It isn't really. There's just a number next to your name. That's real. It's still a game. It's still a video game.
It's one step away from. It's one step away from esports, Ken.
But okay, I get that that's a career.
I'm gonna be able to quit my. I'm gonna be able to quit my job as a barista at the local coffee shop, and I'm gonna be able to start up a Twitch channel and
that's
go
the dream,
jet
man.
setting.
I get it. I understand. That is the dream.
I'm gonna go jet setting around the internet to Among Us Among Us esports events, and I'm gonna get G Fuel. I'm gonna get G Fuel sponsorships, and I'm gonna live that dream.
So, I don't know if you guys have. For me, yes. And where I feel it happens, although I don't know if I call it in a truly non-competitive game or something like that, because I don't play much Among Us. I'm not good at the game, and when I do play, it's always with friends versus randoms. So that's I'm mostly good. It's more about hanging out. But when I had played, because like my main casual game that I go to, which has a competitive element, is still League of Legends. That by itself sounds like what? But specifically the mode ARAMs, all random, all mid, because that's the truly 5-man game that you normally get from Summoner's Rift. I jump in League ARAMs just because you all throw in the middle match. It's just group fights the whole time, and you take a few towers and you're done. And they tend to be faster games. So if you lose, it's like, that kind of sucked. But it's not because someone didn't hold their lane. It's not because you didn't do enough last hits. It's not because you didn't put the right wards down and all those things. And so for me, I go to it because I feel like it should be a less toxic experience. And for the most part, that's true. For the most part, it's true. I have on occasion run into people who play ARAM hardcore, that they go in there and they're like, how dare you initiate too quick here? Why weren't you on that exact thing? You killed this guy, not that guy. And start doing all the typing nonsense, over-pinging, all the things you can do that are toxic behavior, in that they make the game less fun for everyone involved. Not that it's actually productively helping the group.
This is why you have an uber punishing death penalty, so that all of those people end up quitting and your game is only the tryhards. So you know exactly what you're getting into. When you go in. It's also the reason why I don't play League of Legends, and the reason why I don't play Among Us, and the reason why I don't play a lot of games is because I'm not going to suffer that. Also, similarly, I saw a video today that was talking about Burning Crusade Beta, because Burning Crusade Beta exited friends and family, and the first round of beta invites went out to the public. And apparently one of the community managers came on and chatted to the world saying, we will have a zero tolerance policy to any stupidity that happens in our chat, and mass bannings ensued.
Interesting.
Again, this is a tradition that's older than some traditions in Rome, that people are going to abuse general chat.
Yes, you mute that.
Especially in World of Warcraft.
It's trade.
Trade.
Really want to.
Well,
it depends on your server. It depends on your server. Because if you're on
General
chat,
Ogrimmar trade,
or if you're on Moonguard, all.
I agree with that.
But you're right?
I mute my own guild on Moonguard.
If you don't want to, and it's like we treat these things as if you have to be in them. And I guess for the most extreme case where somebody who is incapable, isn't playing with friends and family, is just out there alone, and who really wants to just engage with people, to then get shouted down because they maybe never played it, or played it originally in the case of Classic, like they got into World of Warcraft in like 2012 and never played Classic and don't know the Classic's like way harder. That there's going to be a learning curve there, and so they're going to get shouted at by people. Okay, I don't mind taking the hard stance, but again, so how this all ties into toxicity is the guy whose video I watched said toxic like 8,000 times in 20 minutes, to the point that I seriously thought the entire human race was toxic.
So when we're talking about toxic gamers, I think we all, I just want to make it clear that the three of us here are not of the opinion that toxic gamers don't exist. Of course they do. In fact, we despise them. They are prevalent in many of the games that we play, and we have specifically said that we avoid games often because of those toxic communities. I don't know if you guys ever played Xbox 360 back in the day or online and try to play COD or Halo or something.
I have my very specific Halo online gameplay story of kids who I ran 2 matches in a row with them, and the whole match, because I was one of the few people that had a headset because I buy technology, and they were yelling at me the entire match from the other team how everything you classically hear about your mother and their capability to do things to people they'll never meet and stuff like that. And my response that I've said before was the way I react, because I admit I react poorly to shit talking. I do. Like if we were playing a fighting game head on head or a sports game and you start talking enough smack, it will likely affect my gameplay in a negative way. I admit that is true. But in this situation, I was able to, because they're not there also to pressure me in person. I turned into just like, all right, I'm just playing the game, but if I see you, I'm going to kill you. And at the end of the match,
they become a focus, right?
Well, at the end of the match, again in voice, they were just calling me out on all these things, and my answer was, as I try to be the bigger man, whatever, was not the classic scoreboard, but I was like, I took a step further and saying, no, you guys are right. I suck. I am terrible at this game. I should probably just break my controller. I should probably throw it away. But I did better than you and your friend. And so I let them like do because it was amazing to watch them. You did it! And they just, their comprehension, not that it was high, fell several notches below that where it became unintelligible. I hope for anyone else who might have listened, they got a chuckle out of it.
It's funny.
But yes, I've experienced that.
When Ken asked his question, I could have sworn he was asking why we play Russian roulette with a semi-automatic pistol. Instead of a revolver. Like, why would I do a thing that guarantees that I'm going to lose? Like, why would I do that?
So actually,
no,
it's
that
funny.
Was my point, but that is a good one.
So this, I will. Go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say my point is just that these online communities, and we are aware that there are a high because of the nature of who plays games, and the sad fact is, gamers tend to be a wide range of audience. Like, if you go into Fortnite, you'll get a much younger audience. If you play League of Legends, you'll probably get a middle age. If you play, well, you know, I mean, like 20s to
yes.
40s. If you play classic World of Warcraft, you're playing people who probably played it back in 2005, and therefore were old enough to. So at least 30 plus, generally speaking, but probably 40 plus for a lot of the classic players. And you know, that means that when you've got a wide grasp, probably not gender, right? I think there is still a huge skew towards men in gaming in general, which is a shame. But generally speaking, since there's such a huge variety of people from rich to poor, all across society, all races, all different countries around the world, guess what? You're going to pull in a lot of toxic people because that's the human race, sadly. You know, I don't think that's why I've always kind of hated this whole gamers are the worst people in society. No, they're just anonymous and know that they can get away with it. And that's just humanity.
That's the internet.
Okay,
that's
Ken,
the internet, because we talked about the gaming piece. We can break that one by just saying Todd and I remember arcades. You can only be so toxic in an arcade when the person next to you is, you know, on the controller next to you is playing and can punch you in the face.
You have no idea what belt in martial arts that person has.
Yep. Because you could shit talk during the match, but there were levels, right? There were limits.
Yeah.
And once you crossed it, now it was like, let's step outside.
So I wanna slide on back to something we were going to get into after the break, and I think we're at the point where we can tie it back in.
Okay, right? Real quick, I want to just say that email came, you know, thanks for doing this for the shows. This is what I love to watch. That was from Soda Pop Rocks Jones. So thank you, Soda Pop, for the email. Very much appreciate it.
Welcome, Soda Pop Rocks Jones. We are happy to have broken your email and viewing cherry in the same episode. So
as well as thank you for the follow.
Welcome. By the power of Grayskull with the wrong style of weapon. Yeah. Okay. So let's tie this back to we're using toxic, and I think we're using toxic too much to describe certain people, right? Assholes are toxic, right? And we used to just call them a-holes, right? When it wasn't necessary to tar and feather an entire group of people, we just call the people that acted in a way that we didn't like a-holes. Right? And if you want to take the hard stance on a-holes, I am all for it. Let's take the hard stance on a-holes, but let's take the hard stance on all the a-holes.
Fair.
Right?
I can agree with that. It's what, instead of labeling a group, go by action. And if people are going to do very specific actions, that's what you should rail against, is the action someone's performing. If that action, like we said, is griefing, right, in a game, where they are constantly just going to beat on the person who's just trying to get to their quest, just try to get there, where it's no longer a challenge. It's no longer a thing you're doing because that's an element of the game. For that, you're just specifically targeting someone with the goal of making their day terrible. Yes. That is a-hole behavior, call it toxic, whatever, but that is behavior I don't condone, and I will rail against people who do that.
I am. If you want to say we're going to take the hard stance against a-holes, right? no matter where they exist in the online space on the internet, we are going to give the internet an enema. Right? We're gonna flush all the crap. That's great. I am 100% on board. Most people are not gonna like what that's gonna require because everybody's gonna have to start using their real name.
I'm okay with that.
For a lot of this
I started
stuff.
doing it years ago for that very reason.
Yeah, I'm leaning on the side of it being okay. I was okay with Real ID back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
I thought Real ID was a great idea. But that also means that we're gonna have to do all of them. So the people who in the current environment would be protected by games media, by the weight of the crowd, by the prominence of the people that they're associated with, right? And making fake DMCAs to take it all the way back to the beginning of the show. Guess what? They were an a-hole, and we're going to purge them too. Because we're purging all the a-holes.
Essentially, yes, I can agree with that. I think you're always going to run into challenges, right? With the nuance of the conversation of what people consider to be that behavior, what rises to the level. That's going to be the sticky wicket, right? Because it's not black and white.
Problem. That's the problem, and it's also why every the groups that get labeled toxic are labeled toxic as much for what they believe in as to who they associate with.
I think
right?
it happens.
If you watch Geeks and Gamers or the World Class Bullshitters or that Star Wars girl, right, on YouTube, if you watch any of those YouTube channels, you're going to be tarred and feathered as a toxic fan. Because those channels in the past have been called out by name as part of the toxic fandom.
So you mean being associated with or identifying that those are groups that you follow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I got you. I agree that you should not label someone in association just because they happen to watch, follow, whatever it was. I may, in my own personal life, form opinions about a person based on what they choose to follow heavily. And I will probably be, for me, more aware of when they give context or give their own opinions. If I know that they also happen to consume certain things, that it may be what helps them form that opinion. And so I thus may react to them differently than others. But that's a personal thing, but I'm not going to try to make that as something that I expect all of society to do and all the world to. And I think that's one of the big points about the consequences of labeling any group as toxic, as a-holes, as whatever you want to do with it. It's because the point of it, right, is to not determine how you as an individual interact with said person or group. It's to color how all of people, society, greater groups, thus look at that person or that group that you have labeled. And that's where I think it gets to be a real struggle and a challenge. Because it is saying, you're someone who follows this, you must also be this. I'll
tell you this, it's really hard. It's really hard. I had somebody who was close to me point me at an episode of a podcast, and I knew the person who was doing the podcast, and my immediate reaction was to oh my god, I can't believe you're pointing me at an episode of this guy's podcast. Like, don't you know who he is?
Gotcha.
And rather than listening to it and taking what's being said on face value.
Well, it makes sense though. We should also base it on previous data, right? So if you see some conspiracy nut spouting nonsense, and then you get linked to a video of his, you're immediately going to say, all right, well, I don't really feel like I need to click on that because I highly doubt that in the past 3 years since I last saw it, he's cleaned up his act, went and got a PhD in the topic, and now knows what he's talking about and has refuted his previous stance. Pretty unlikely, right? I mean, generally speaking, when somebody puts something out online, they're going to stick with that stance, especially when it's so drastic as to be labeled as a conspiracy nut. I mean, that being said, I used to, for example, listen, this is one I probably shouldn't be saying at all. I used to listen to Jordan Peterson. I fell into that hole for a while, and it's because I listened to some of his lectures and I thought these actually make sense. Some of these points, and then I heard a couple things that I was like, wait a minute, what he just said, that one thing that was very passive that he just like glazed over, was really like hand wavy. Just believe me because I'm a person in power. And I went and looked it up and realized he was completely wrong with some of the points he said. And I realized from then on that that one particular person was not particularly verbose in the fields that he claims to be. And that made me have less faith in him. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that he therefore is always wrong or always right. I'm saying that I'm capable of saying, I'm going to fact check what I listen to, and that means as well in the future when I have a source, I'm not going to implicitly trust or implicitly not trust it. However, I will still have a sort of colored view of, like, not quite rose tinted glasses, if you know what I mean, but like, I will still be able to go through the perspective and the lens of critical thinking when I see that in the future now.
100%. Yep, 100%.
Well, and
no, it's true. And
there's the two sides of what you just said, though, Ken. I do want to point out, but yes, it's the scientific approach, honestly, right? It's you adjust your knowledge based on new information, very like watered down thing of it. But at the same time, I think it does flip the other way, because I think you have to be careful, Ken, where you say like that somebody who posted something online like this may not have changed. I think you always have to at least allow that people grow and learn. And because I know some of the words that came out of my mouth 10 years ago may not be completely how I believe of the world today. Yeah. And I say this too because that's one of the challenges that we always run into at the extent beyond all of this conversation to one we've had before when we use the other overloaded term of cancel, which is people choosing to have as harsh a response to a person's some poor action they did in the past or are currently doing, and in a way don't allow or leave room for that person to ever learn, grow, or change. And
that's exactly my point, though. That's what I'm saying. I used to have those beliefs about Jordan Peterson, and a couple of times on Reddit, like somebody put up a post about how they're having a hard time in life or something, and I said something along the lines of, "Well, you should check out this one thing. It's a rather stoic view from this guy. His name's Jordan Peterson," and people jumped on me, and I was like, "What the hell?" And that was one of the things that prompted me to look further into him and be like, "Oh, right, I see now why I can see why people have such strong views about him personally."
Well, and that's the thing, though, because yes, he has some things that may be problematic at some levels, but at the same time, he has some things I've heard him say that still do make sense and ring true. So it's a hard thing because you can run into that with anyone, and it's more, I think, to your point of seeing what people's specialties and actual knowledge is. Yes, Todd?
Soda Pop Rocks Jones asks a really good question, and Lantis came up with a follow-up, and I really want to address it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Cool. Soda Pop Rocks Jones says, what would you say is the biggest difference between toxic gamers and elitist gamers? And Lantis said elitism is toxic, and I disagree. I am absolutely, positively 100% an elitist. I am not an a-hole. Right? And to me, that makes all the difference. I will never tell you, like, I will never, ever use the words "I'm better than you" in any context, in any social interaction, unless you're trying to demonstrate superiority in some fashion where I know that it's not true, right? I would never play the resume game with anybody as an example, right? Just right.
Yeah, I got you.
Not to be braggadocious, but it's not fair.
No, it's especially because that's mostly based around personal circumstance more than anything, right?
And I do want to get into that.
Tough thing too.
I want to get into that same comment. I saw that in the chat as well, and I agree in the sense of what we described before, where just because you belong to a certain group doesn't always mean you are X or Y or whatever. So I believe elitism in gaming is a certain level of traits about how you approach your gaming and what you choose to focus on, that just having that level of desire to do things that make you elitist doesn't necessarily make you toxic. I think what it turns into is the actions that go beyond, right? It's, do you then form how you allow others to play the game based on that view. And like one that we ran into before, and I don't know if he's on today, but it's always been a description like with Serpencer is one of the ones I like to bring up in this sense, because I will openly call to his face, because he knows it, that he prefers to play any game the way he wants to play versus any concept of what might be the most optimal way to satisfy a goal of winning the game in a certain way, right? It's a discussion of what he got, what he gains joy in the game. But I say this
which is weird, because 15 years ago he was perfectly content to play the way he was told to play because he had the rating guild.
Well, he was, right? But now since then he has no desire to go to those kind of games anymore. He lost that interest. And we've discussed it.
I know.
He wants to play ninjas in every game. And so for him, it's something where, so as long as you know, whenever you're playing around individuals who like to play a game in whatever way that they gain joy, unless it is to grief others, unless their joy is making the life difficult for others in life, because I don't condone that.
Those people are a-holes, Wayne.
Yeah, so that's the thing. As long as what I'm supporting is the people who want to play the game in a way they want, not the people who want to be a-holes to play the game. It is me in Call of Duty Warzone. The mass amounts of cheaters that play that game, that when we have our conversation with my group that are playing it, are like, how is this fun for you? We don't get it. We don't understand how allowing a bot to aim for you and shoot through walls for you and track for you is somehow entertaining. Because at that point, it's not a game. It's like, who bought the better bot? I don't understand myself. But like I said, we don't get it. If that's your form of how you play the game, that's one I don't condone. But in general, an elitist...
I could theorize that for you, like if you want. It's the perversion of the idea that games are... The point of playing a game is to win it. Right? And while you and your group are finding value in the playing of the game and the winning of losing based on your own skill, right? The perversion of that philosophy is, I'm going to win the game no matter the cost.
Okay.
Right?
I see what you're saying. Yep.
It's the application of entitlement to the sort of utopian version of what gaming is, right? It's also the source of my elitism. Like, to me, the best game is the game that, when played to win, the best player wins, right? Most of the time, or all the time, I guess, if we're talking about the utopian game, the most perfectly designed game, the best player would always win. Right, and if you want to add some factors of short-term luck to offset long-term skill,
I
fine.
enjoy that. Yeah,
I was gonna say, because there's a balance there for the flair or flavor of the game, because
any kind of optimization process requires some kind of noise, in my opinion, to improve properly.
And again, I don't want to get bogged down in this conversation, but Legend Tinker, the point of games is not to enjoy them. Tic-tac-toe is still a game and is not enjoyable.
It is at a certain point in age.
You have to square with that. I can play tic-tac-toe in such a way that I never lose. It's still a game. It's the boringest thing that you could possibly imagine.
No, it used to be fun, though. There's a reason why you know how to do that. It's because you bothered to learn, because you found it interesting, because it was fun.
Well, that's why I said there's a timeline on that. It is an introduction to gaming. And thus, when you're still learning rules and mechanics, it is a valuable tool for that. It very quickly turns into something that once both sides understand it, nobody can win, nobody can lose.
You don't play tic-tac-toe anymore, I guess.
That's the key, right? That's why you
doesn't
move
stop
on
being a game, though, does it?
Well, it goes from tic-tac-toe to checkers to chess, and then chess can go indefinite, right? It's that kind of progression in what the base mechanics become in a full boom, right? Or Othello, or Mahjong, or others. But that's the thing, right? It is an introductory game. But I agree with you in that sense, that just because a game exists doesn't mean it's always fun. But I will tell you, at a time, tic-tac-toe was fun when I was like younger than I can remember whenever I first learned to play it. But yes, but in general, I think we do talk to that, like what Legend's bringing up. There are games, I knew that reference. There are games that the goal of it isn't a specific win condition like Minecraft, right? Where it is something you make of it based on whatever it is you want in that experience. So like there's all these ideas about any of that. But when we get back to like the initial discussion about toxicity, right? And what we were talking about the behaviors that are shown and what, like Todd said, labeling it as an a-holism, when people are just doing poor behaviors towards others, that I think I agree in general terms, most of us should be able to get on board with not wanting that to persist, that not wanting that kind of behavior to define any group we are parts of, I would think, for the most part. Maybe there are people who still do. I don't know. People who are fans of like the Raiders. I don't know.
Well, so I want to, there's something that you talked about that I want to touch on briefly.
Okay.
And right, so we're talking about a competitive environment and the concept of the psych out in competitive environments.
Okay.
And so I think there's a line that is very, very fuzzy, but I think I could be clever about the way I interacted with you that would cause me to psych you out, that would not cause me to be an a-hole.
I mean, you're talking about some skill there, but yes, I agree.
I'm saying that's an area that exists.
I agree.
That
I think that's a very finite one, but I think it exists.
Sure. But if you and I were playing, say, in your basement, and we were playing Unreal Tournament, Team Deathmatch Instagib, and I owned your face for about 5 minutes, that there are things that I could say to you that were very gentle, very kind, very respectful, but that would get under your skin to the point that it would give me a competitive advantage the next time we encountered each other, in one of those maps.
Yes. Oh, I agree.
Okay.
And I think true, like, experts in their field, if you will, right?
But I also think that psyching people out is getting lumped in with toxicity. And probably 80-90% of the time it probably is, because it's probably people being jerks. But there's some fuzziness around the edge of that I don't think qualifies as toxicity, that qualifies as a good psych out. Like,
oh no, I agree. I think the challenge is that most people, when they've experienced someone literally using the effect of trying to psych somebody out, it's often done in a aggressive way. It's often done in a way that is, if not itself toxic, aggressive, or plays down on the person by doubt and stuff like that. It's not the, I don't know. My favorite example that I've ever witnessed of psyching out was in the original Arnold Schwarzenegger video about bodybuilding and was it No Holds Barred? No, what was the original one with him and Ferrigno? But the bodybuilding
gosh.
one.
Yeah.
Shoot, I have a signed copy sitting on a shelf over here.
But, I was going to say No Holds Barred is a wrestling movie.
No, I know. That's why I was like, no, but Pumping Iron or whatever it was. But is in the scene in that one when Ferrigno's coming up as a new up-and-comer, and he legitimately has everything to be the star. And you have Schwarzenegger come in there and just, in some of the, like, I mean, he was a D-bag about it, but he did it in that smart way, right? He was like, no, that's all right. I mean, once you get some more experience, you'll probably really be able to get competitive. So it's good that you're participating, you're kind of coming out here. So in a couple more years, when you've got something under your belt, you'll probably finally actually be competitive, and you might be able to win then. When they were going directly to compete against each other. And he got under his skin, and arguably that is what got Ferrigno to not win Olympian that year or whatever, Mr. Universe.
So it happens all the time in real sports, and I want to get a Soda Pop Rocks Jones. I am not arguing that a dickish or jerky play style, just because it works once, you should always do it. What I'm arguing is there's a way that you can talk to somebody that isn't being
degrading
I don't
or
know I don't know
hostile.
I don't know what being. I don't know if I can give you a bullet point list as to what's an a-hole and what's not, but I know it when I see it. Where you're not being an a-hole to somebody, but you've gotten under their skin to the point that they're not going to perform as well as they might.
That's arguably part of the game, though. That's part of the competition.
Yeah, that's what Todd's saying is that is a real element.
The point. And if you want a real world reference, Soda Pop Rock Jones, there are a ton of videos out there about professional American football defensive backs and wide receivers chatting at each other. Now, some of that can get a little vulgar, and when it does go too far, it ends up turning into a fist fight. See Michael Crabtree and Aqib Talib from 5-6 years ago. So it can get out of hand, and it can get out of hand very quickly. But, in sports, it happens all the time. Like there's so many of these stories where somebody tried to talk trash to Michael Jordan and he put 50 on him.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And then started talking to him.
Yeah, there are certain people that's a mistake, right? Oh, man. So, all right. Where are some other places, though, that we have seen a-hole behavior come out and get labeled, or even if it wasn't that behavior, where some company or tool has labeled a group that had criticism and stuff like that, come out that caused things to change? Because we talked about the Snyder Cut, right? And how arguably the fan base got out there and said, this is garbage, the original, we heard this rumor about the Snyder Cut. It came out, and so far, I saw it, enjoyed it, Todd saw it, enjoyed it. I've heard a lot of good things back on it, and even up to what Soda said originally when we were talking about it's bad, he said 4 hours. It's 4 hours you don't miss because it's actually quite good. But at least in my opinion, it's when is that kind of criticism valuable versus when it's not? Because I've seen like this example where I'd say it's good, and initially Warner Brothers came back and said, we have no desire to even revisit the Snyder verse going forward. We're done with it. We gave you this thing, but we're done. Lately, as of very recent, there's a little bit of chink in that armor, right? That because there's been so much positivity put towards the Snyder Cut, and Warner Brothers has come out and said, we're not even going to look at more. Now they're saying, well, we'll see. And so arguably, you get enough people, in this case, having criticism against one thing and praising what happened since, we may get another. Look at the Sonic movie. Good or bad movie-wise, the original adaptation visualization of Sonic that was released, and the fan base went, heck no, this is garbage. And then they went back and re-edited it, and it suddenly looked like Sonic and not some weird hairy boy. It was a legitimately okay movie. Like, it was not the garbage it was about to be, right? I enjoyed it. But, like I said, it went steps above where it got better because the fan base criticized. And I'm trying to remember if anyone tried to label that criticism as toxic. But I've seen examples where criticism, in many cases what I think is legitimate, has been labeled as such just because people don't want to accept that something they did was actually bad. And it was actually horrible. Where I'm trying to think of examples of legitimate toxicity that I think has been horrible. The Nazis. I don't know. It's like, I wait for the really easy punch.
Yep.
I'm trying to think of like actual examples of toxicity that is like legitimately just toxicity and not legitimate criticism.
Sexism, racism, anything that's based on attacking somebody for what they're born.
But the problem you say in there, Ken, are massive generalizations that is the same as saying toxicity. You got to refine it down to a more specific example of something that was toxic. Because, I mean, just saying sexism puts in my head... N-word. You say that, yet there's a whole genre of music that does it constantly still. So there's still nuances. In general terms, yes. In general terms, being a Nazi is bad, and that's one of the ones that the world has generally accepted is bad. I don't care where you are in time now, it is bad. We can kill Nazis in games forever. That one has been defined.
I don't think you can say that word on the internet anymore, but yeah. No, you're right. I was gonna say, as an example, what happened specifically to Kelly Marie Tran. Right?
Need the specific again. His name did not come back.
Well, she was the actress who played Rose Tico.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And she got she personally got
was toxic.
Bunch of what I would consider to be unacceptable heat.
Yes.
To the point where it, we don't know, but it looks like because of the amount and the intensity of the criticism that she was getting, that it forced her off social media.
So I agree.
Right?
There have been actors that have been attacked for doing their job, portraying a character the way it was written and meant to be portrayed, and received the flack of people's dislike of the character and the movie or the show. And that is inappropriate and wrong, because that's not legit criticism of that actor. Right.
But at the same time, I have a really big problem of Rose Tico's entire storyline.
Yeah, you can be critical of the character.
Of the character itself. It has nothing to do with Kelly Marie Tran, right? Just like I can say Poe Dameron is just Wedge Antilles with a dark paint job. That's not Oscar Isaac's fault.
You mean, Wedge Antilles given an actual role?
Yeah.
But no, you're right? It's like, not...
Wedge, I mean, at least we know Wedge isn't part of the Resistance, because if he were part of the Resistance, he would be the best pilot in the Resistance.
Gotcha. No, and you're right.
Wedge
and
was off elsewhere screwing around, apparently.
I appreciate the conversation we're having in the chat, because they are bringing up examples of others who have and haven't, right? And some of the criticisms or concerns that have been brought up initially that were not based on anything good. It was, the discussion, not knowing storyline and stuff, when people initially reacted to the recognition of Finn, right? That, what? Yeah. But he's black. And it's like, wow. Wow, okay, right? Let's see. Soda Pop says, Wayne, you're talking about like people saying the new Charlie's Angels movie wasn't great because men didn't want to see it versus it was a terrible movie. So those are the things where it's like, again, whether it's, toxicity is hating something just because it exists without actually looking at it as a thing, versus the criticism aspect, right? It's me saying I liked the newer Ghostbusters movie with the gals that were in the lead as a whole. I thought their treatment of whichever Chris's character, whatever, was...
Yeah.
I don't know the right word for what I felt like that silliness they provided towards that character and how they had him play. That it went beyond just the portrayal of, the dumb blonde, but it's a guy, to something more, right? But as a whole, I liked the movie and things like that.
See, I didn't like that movie.
Which I know a lot of people who didn't.
But I'm comfortable acknowledging that it's not for me and it's not for me.
Well, and the criticism, as long as your criticism isn't just that, there are women in the lead role and therefore it's garbage, then, if your criticism is the themes they portrayed and the way they were talking about the main characters didn't appeal to you, that's fine. But I knew people who were very much like, what? But they're girls and therefore this. I was like, wow, that is where I think it starts to cross the line from actual criticism.
Totally. It's 100%.
Sorry, 100%. Hando, but if you were here, it's your desire to never see episode 9 because of things you heard. That's toxic, man.
Well, but there's another
way in differentiating between the like if you I think the problem with a lot of these articles we see written by journalists criticizing toxic culture and subcultures is often due to the fact that they'll go and do their research by looking on Twitter, and they'll look at, for example, hashtag Star Wars, hashtag Mandalorian, hashtag whatever, right? And they will see a bunch of really toxic people who are being retweeted a lot because they are inflammatory, and generally speaking, things that are inflammatory are interesting and therefore float to the top. They bubble to the top. We see this on Reddit. We see it on we used to see it back on Dig back in the day. We see it on 9gag. You see it on Twitter. You see it on Facebook comments, everywhere, right? Because generally speaking, if you say something that's vitriolic, you are going to get a lot more likes than somebody who responds, haha, nice article, right?
Well, or anyone that has a level-headed response.
Yeah, right. So the people who actually have level-headed standard responses are hidden away, whereas the vitriolic ones bubble to the top. So if you do a search for a hashtag and you're a journalist and that's the first thing you see, and that's the first 500 things you see are people just agreeing with that or disagreeing with that vehemently back and forth, you're going to think, wow, this fan base is toxic. It's
Okay,
much like jumping in
okay.
a League of Legends game and jumping in your first ever ranked match in bronze, and lo and behold, everybody's toxic because you're in bronze. They're all bitter and hate each other, and they do not represent the average ARAM player, for example, of League of Legends, right? And I think that's part of the problem is you only see a very small amount, and the smallest 1% are usually the loudest.
Okay, Ken, that's fine, but if you're a journalist, you have a responsibility to care more
Oh, for
about
sure.
I
about
do
the
agree with
subject
that.
you're writing about.
I do agree with that.
Right?
And we do see a lot of poor examples where, and I will go to a term that I see more and more, doesn't matter the site I go to, that I feel that came to mind when Ken, you were describing this, is clickbait. That people putting out sensational information to get people's eyeballs on whatever content they're after. And that, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of media sources have fallen to that. And I am distressed because I go to, you guys, I don't know if others out there have seen this or not, but I'll go to a site that in general, the article is actually well written and a decent article. But when you get below it, they have this whole block of like nothing but clickbait links to this, you know, celebrities. Oh my God, they look like this today. And, you know, I had this one secret to get better health and it's ... right? Those kind of nonsense things that all exist below that make me think, is this what we've become? That nothing can exist without something clickbaity around it, right?
So you're seeing several things happen, right? The business model of hard news has, I would say, past tense, has collapsed.
I would basically
And
agree. I don't think there's anywhere that's just news.
Switching the business model from a devotion to the center and facts being the center to a model where you're trying to garner as much of a niche audience as possible, right? And there are lots of niche audiences. And by the way, this is a business model perfected by Fox News first. They're the ones that did it first. That the entire media industry has gone this way, or if not the entire media industry, large chunks of the media industry have gone this way.
I would agree.
It deals with the same problem, right? I mean, if you go and do all the hashtag search and you find all this vitriolic stuff and then you post an article about it, guess what? Your article's also going to get more reads than if you just put an article saying the opposite thing.
Agreed.
So generally speaking, if a bipolarized journalistic not just article, but you know, an entire branch of journalism, your entire company being polarized means that people are going to be interested from both sides, and that's why you often see things like Fox News, which is very right wing, is owned by Fox, which is generally seen to be a left wing organization, strangely enough, and they do a lot of left wing TV shows and film and such, and yet their media is very right wing. It's because they've realized that's how they make the most money, right? For whatever reason, that's their niche.
Well, and Ken, you were saying there in general it's a bigger thing. I wanted to try it back to gaming as we're getting to the top of the show here, end of the show, because it's one of the things I wonder about when I try to watch, in general, gaming Twitch streams, or things like that, or some of the biggest channels. I struggle because, to me, and maybe it's just because I'm old, but so many of the channels I see out there that are popular are people just yelling or being overly whatever in their actions. That to me is exhausting and not people I would want to game with. Yet they seem to pull so many views. And I wonder if that is because of this general sense in society of it needing to have some level of, I don't know, outrage or emphasis to make it interesting for people. That's what catches their interest. That's what gets people's eyeballs on. That the people who are going to, because I've seen the ones who stream in competitive games, they are constantly calling out the people they're either gaming against and even their own teammates. Like they are the best thing that has ever existed, and anything that happens that's not in support of what they're doing is somehow wrong. Oh, and man, do they just go like
Twitch is a huge problem. Gaming, YouTube too. They're both a huge problem, right? And essentially what it's done is it's given people who have no idea about game design an air of legitimacy to talk about game design, right? This goes back to the earliest days of Destiny 2 when basically gaming YouTube and the Destiny 2 Twitch directory was advocating for stuff that wasn't going to make Destiny 2 better, but was going to lead to more viewership for their channels. And it's just like I can see this coming a mile away, right? You're advocating for one-hit kill griefing in PvP and more raids. And you want all the weapons that are capable of one-hit kills in PvP to be tucked behind the raids. Like, you don't need 15 postgraduate degrees in mathematics to understand where that's coming from. You just don't. So there's a big problem. There's a big problem with Twitch and gaming YouTube. Like the free advertising aspect of it, that these people who have given no basis for earning any of the perks that they get other than the fact that they can draw, which I guess is the only standard that matters. Like I said, they get to influence game design, and none of them knows thing one about designing software, let alone video games. Oh, and I gotta say to Soda Pop, Rocks Jones, and Legend Tinker, you absolutely should watch Ocean's 8, because I have had dreams that have started with Heidi Klum and Sandra Bullock speaking German to each other. So,
I do enjoy that movie. It's another fun one.
The only criticism I had of that movie, to be honest, is they took Lou and Debbie, they took Rusty and Danny, pushed them together into an amalgam, mixed it up a little bit, split it down the middle, pulled them apart, and called them Lou and Debbie.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just like, well, no, these people would be different people.
Yeah, they could have been a little more unique in those characters. Basically,
I
right?
thought so.
But
I thought so. That said, movie's awesome.
All right, we are getting to the top of the show here.
Yeah. I do want to say before we do our final thing, I just wanted to mention to everybody we're going to have a little chat after the show here and talk about how to improve the show. We do this once in a while, every few months. The three of us get together and we chat about general improvements. And I would like to offer to everyone out there, if you have any feedback for our show or shows, be it the format, the structure, technical issues such as audio, video, or the way that the display looks, how we moderate, anything at all, the length of the show, the name of the show, our intros, our outros, our ad break in the middle, all that stuff. Let us know if you have any feedback. Either post it in the chat or send it into our email address. That would be very much appreciated, especially now.
Well, and I do want to say that for those, because we've been having such a great conversation today, if you'd like to continue in the conversation, this is an opportunity where if you send an email, as you heard from our epic emails we get from Ionis most weeks, we are happy to have you feedback in, and we'll have the conversation on the next week's show. For anything that you might hear the show and you had thoughts, but you hadn't got it all locked together while we were on live and during the chat, feel free to get us in a little longer format by emailing us at VtWShowX@gmail.com so that we can hear what you want to contribute. We really do like to hear from all of you each show. It makes us happy, and it helps us diversify our conversation. But with that, we do need to wrap things up here, and so we are going to call it at the top of today's show. And we are very appreciative for all of you jumping in with us. And to get us out of here, we want to make sure we wish all of you... Well, wait. Ken lead us out, and then we will /salute you.
Peace home!
You can find us all over the interwebs. There's various places in which you can interact with our social medias and take part in discussions or even start one. To do so and find all of these places, you can go to www.linktr.ee/showx. Go check out there and you will find all the links to all of the things related to the show. That includes our Facebook, our Reddit, our Instagram, our donation links for Patreon, and much else besides. So that's linktr.ee/showx. linktr.ee/showx. Everything is in there that you need. We also have a sister show, also on our little network here, which is on the same YouTube page as Versus the World Video. So go into Versus the World Video on YouTube and you'll find a playlist in there called Where Are My Pros At. They also have a link tree. It's linktr.ee/Where Are My Pros At. It's a similar podcast type thing, except it's pre-recorded and published approximately weekly, where they cover and review books. And in the next month, they're also going to be reviewing movies of the books they've read. So go check that out, and all the shows that we have on our little channel here. And be sure to like and subscribe to everything that you see. Even if you only watch on Twitch, just jump on YouTube and give us a little like. It helps us populate, and it helps YouTube figure out the algorithms of who they should recommend our videos to and such. So even if it doesn't seem to make any difference, I can assure you it actually does in the background. It really helps us out.
Cool.
With that,
everybody, we want to thank you very much. We will catch you again next week, and we want to wish all of you for joining in a very massive and happy salute. And we will catch you again next week, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. See you in the next zombie. Good night. I forgot.